Welcome back to the BL Story Room. If you're looking for a love story that hurts in all the right ways before it heals you, you're in the right place. Before we dive into the rain and the shadows tonight, do me a favor, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep these stories coming. Now, take a deep breath. Let's step into the dark. Chapter 1. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the dirt stick to you. Seo Jihwan stared at the tips of his sneakers. They were wet. The canvas was soaked through because he couldn't afford the Uber to the address on the card, and the bus stop was 4 blocks away. He shivered, but it wasn't just the cold dampness seeping into his socks. It was the room. It was a private office at the back of a high-end jazz club that smelled of old leather and stale cigar smoke. The kind of place that felt expensive and dangerous, like a loaded gun wrapped in velvet. $200,000. The number floated in Jihwan's mind. It was the debt his father had left behind before vanishing into the ether, leaving Jihwan with a literature degree he couldn't use, and a terrifying group of loan sharks who had promised to start taking fingers by Friday. Today was Thursday. The heavy oak door creaked. Jihwan's breath hitched. He stood up, his hands fumbling to smooth the wrinkles in his cheap, thrift store blazer. A man walked in. The air in the room seemed to get heavier, sucking the oxygen out of Jihwan's lungs. Baek Dojun. The name alone was enough to make people on the streets of Koreatown lower their voices. He was taller than he looked in the blurry paparazzi photos, broad-shouldered in a black suit that fit him so perfectly it looked like a second skin. He didn't look at Jihwan. He walked straight to the liquor cabinet, pouring a glass of amber liquid with steady, terrifyingly calm hands. "You're wet," Dojun said. His voice was deep, a low rumble that vibrated in Jihwan's chest. It wasn't a question. It was an observation of a flaw. I walked," Jihwan managed to say. His voice sounded thin, pathetic. Dojun turned. If Jihwan expected a monster, he was confused. Dojun was devastatingly handsome, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes that were the color of obsidian. But they were dead eyes. There was no light in them, just a flat, cold assessment. He looked at Jihwan the way a butcher looks at a side of beef, deciding where to make the first cut. "Sit," Dojun commanded. Jihwan sat. The leather chair swallowed him. Dojun placed a single sheet of paper on the desk between them. He didn't sit. He leaned against the edge of the desk, towering over Jihwan. "You know who I am?" Dojun asked. "Yes." "Then you know I don't run a charity. You need money." "I need a ghost." Jihwan blinked, confusion fighting through the fear. "A ghost? I need someone to live in my house," Dojun said, taking a slow sip of his drink. He watched Jihwan over the rim of the glass. "I need a partner. On paper. Someone to stand next to me at dinners, so the other families stop trying to marry off their daughters to me. Someone to warm the bed, metaphorically. You will not touch me. You will not ask about my business. You will be seen, you will be safe, and you will be silent." He slid the paper forward. 1 year. Your father's debt is paid in full tonight. Plus a stipend for your silence afterward. It was a lifeline. It was a trap. Jihwan looked at the contract. The words blurred. Domestic protection agreement. "And if I say no?" Jihwan whispered. Dojun set the glass down. The sound of glass on wood echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. He leaned in close. Close enough that Jihwan could smell him. Sandalwood, rain, and something sharp like iron. Dojun reached out. His fingers were large, calloused. He didn't grab Jihwan. He just brushed a stray, wet lock of hair away from Jihwan's forehead. The touch was barely there, ghost-light, but Jihwan felt his skin burn where the man's finger had grazed him. The proximity was suffocating. Jihwan's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked up, trapping his gaze in Dojun's pitch-black eyes. For a second, just a split second, he saw something flicker in the mob boss's face. Not cruelty. Exhaustion. "If you say no," Dojun said softly, his voice dropping an octave, "you walk out that door. And tomorrow, the men looking for your father find you. I won't stop them." It wasn't a threat. It was just a fact. Jihwan looked at the hand near his face. It was a hand that had ended lives. He knew the rumors. The Reaper of Seattle. The man who kills everyone he loves. But Jihwan didn't have a life left to lose. He was already drowning. Dojun was just offering him a boat made of knives. "Where do I sign?" Jihwan asked. Dojun stared at him for a long moment. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost imperceptibly. He pulled a heavy fountain pen from his pocket and held it out. Jihwan took it. His hand shook, but he pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. "Seo Jihwan." When he looked up, Dojun was no longer leaning. He was standing straight, buttons done up, the wall of ice back in place. Good, Dojun said, turning his back on him. The car is outside. Don't pack. You won't need anything from your old life. Wait, Jihwan stood up, his legs trembling. Mr. Baek, why me? There are 1,000 people who would kill for this money. Dojun stopped at the door. He didn't turn around. Because, Dojun said into the shadows, you have the eyes of a man who has already given up. And I don't have the energy to break someone new. He walked out. Jihwan stood alone in the expensive room, the pen still warm in his hand, listening to the rain battering against the window. He had just sold his next year to the devil. But as he remembered the phantom heat of Dojun's finger on his forehead, Jihwan realized the scariest part wasn't the danger. It was that for the first time in months, he didn't feel alone. Chapter 2. The estate wasn't a home. It was a fortress dressed up as a mansion. It sat on a cliff overlooking the grey, churning Puget Sound, isolated by miles of pine forest and a 10-foot iron gate. Inside, it was all glass, steel and silence. The kind of silence that hurt your ears. It had been 2 weeks since Jihwan had signed his life away. 2 weeks of living in a museum, where he was the only exhibit. He learned the rules quickly, mostly by observation, because Dojun spoke to him as little as possible. Rule 1. Never enter the West Wing. Rule 2. Dinner is at 8 p.m. sharp. Don't be late. Rule 3. Be invisible. Jihwan spent his days in the library, a massive 2-story room filled with books that looked like they had never been opened. He traced the spines of first editions, feeling like an intruder in a mausoleum. He was safe, the loan sharks had vanished as promised, but he felt like a bird in a gilded cage, waiting for the owner to remember he existed. Tonight, the routine broke. Jihwan was sitting in the living room, reading a worn copy of The Great Gatsby he'd found tucked away on a high shelf. It was 11 p.m. The house should have been asleep. The front door slammed open. Jihwan flinched, dropping the book. Voices, harsh, urgent, echoed from the foyer. He knew he should hide. Be invisible. That was the rule. But instinct, stupid and brave, pulled him toward the noise. He peered around the corner of the hallway. Baek Dojun was leaning heavily against his second-in-command, a burly man named Kong. Dojun's pristine white shirt was ruined. A dark, wet stain was spreading rapidly across his side, blooming like a gruesome flower. Blood. So much blood. Get the doctor, Dojun gritted out, his face pale and beaded with sweat, but his voice still commanded absolute authority. He's an hour out, boss. The storm, Kong argued, panic edging his tone. Dojun hissed in pain as he tried to stand on his own, shoving Kong away. He stumbled, his hand smearing blood on the white marble wall. Jihwan didn't think. He moved. Bring him to the kitchen, Jihwan said. His voice was steady, surprising even himself. Both men looked up. Dojun's eyes were hazy, struggling to focus. When he saw Jihwan, his expression darkened. Go to your room, Dojun snarled. It was a weak, wet sound. Now. You're bleeding out, Jihwan countered, stepping forward. He wasn't a doctor, but he had spent years taking care of his diabetic father. He knew how to handle a crisis. He knew what shock looked like. And if you wait an hour for a doctor, you'll be dead. I know first aid. Basic stitching. Let me help. No, Dojun growled, swaying dangerously. Don't touch me. Shut up, Jihwan said. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Kong looked terrified. No one told Baek Dojun to shut up. But Dojun didn't kill him. His knees buckled. Jihwan lunged forward, catching the larger man. The weight was immense, crushing. Dojun was hot, burning with fever and adrenaline. Jihwan wrapped an arm around Dojun's waist, gritting his teeth against the strain. Kitchen. Now, Jihwan ordered Kong. 10 minutes later, Jihwan was washing his hands in the sink, the water turning pink. Dojun was sitting on the kitchen island, shirt stripped off, revealing a torso that was a map of old violence, scars upon scars. But the fresh wound, a jagged knife slash across his ribs, was the only thing Jihwan focused on. This is going to hurt, Jihwan murmured, soaking a cloth in alcohol. Dojun didn't look at the wound. He stared straight ahead, his jaw locked tight enough to snap bone. He didn't make a sound as Jihwan cleaned the cut. Not a whimper. Not a groan. He just breathed, slow and ragged. Jihwan worked efficiently, his small hands moving with surprising grace over Dojun's skin. He could feel the tension in Dojun's muscles, the sheer power radiating off him, but also the tremors. The man was in agony. Why? Dojun asked suddenly. His voice was rough, barely a whisper. Jaiwan paused, needle in hand. Why what? Why help? Dojun turned his head. His eyes were clearer now, piercing. They were close again. Too close. Jaiwan could see the flecks of gold in the black irises. You're a contract. This isn't in the job description. You paid my father's debt, Jaiwan said softly. He looked down, focusing on the needle. I pay my debts too. He began to stitch. Dojun flinched, his abdominal muscles contracting sharply under Jaiwan's fingers. Sorry, Jaiwan whispered. Without thinking, he placed his free hand gently on Dojun's uninjured shoulder. A touch meant to ground him. Just breathe. Look at me. Don't look down. Dojun looked at him. He didn't look away. For the next 10 minutes, the only sound in the massive kitchen was the storm outside and the rhythm of their breathing. Jaiwan was painfully aware of Dojun's skin under his fingertips. The heat, the hardness, the vulnerability. When the last stitch was tied and the bandage applied, Jaiwan stepped back, his hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. Done, Jaiwan exhaled. Dojun looked down at the neat row of stitches. He ran a thumb over the white gauze. Then he looked back at Jaiwan. The mask was gone. For the first time, Jaiwan saw the man beneath the monster. He looked young. He looked tired. You have good hands, Dojun murmured. The compliment was simple, but the way he said it, low, intimate, made warmth flood Jaiwan's cheeks. I should clean this up, Jaiwan stammered, turning to the bloody towels. Jaiwan froze. It was the first time Dojun had used his name. Not you. Not kid. Jaiwan. He turned around. Dojun was still sitting on the counter, shirtless, dangerous, and beautiful. Thank you, Dojun said. It wasn't a transaction. It was genuine. Jaiwan nodded, unable to speak. He turned and fled the kitchen, his heart racing faster than it had when he was stitching up a crime lord. Back in his room, Jaiwan leaned against the closed door, sliding down until he hit the floor. He brought his hands up to his face. He could still smell the copper tang of blood. But underneath that, stronger and more persistent, was the scent of sandalwood and rain. He closed his eyes. He was supposed to be a ghost. He was supposed to be invisible. But tonight, Baek Dojun had seen him. And God help him, Jaiwan had wanted to be seen. Chapter 3. The stitches held. The distance between them did not. After the night in the kitchen, the silence in the house changed. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of a tomb anymore. It was charged. Waiting. Dojun didn't acknowledge what happened. He went back to his suits, his late meetings, his cold demeanor. But Jaiwan noticed the small things. The way Dojun lingered in the dining room a little longer after finishing his meal. The way he stopped locking the door to his private study. It was a Wednesday when Jaiwan found him. Insomnia was a cruel companion, and it had driven Jaiwan out of his bed at 3 a.m. He wandered down the dark hallway toward the kitchen for water, but a sliver of light from the library stopped him. The door was ajar. Jaiwan pushed it open gently. Dojun was there. He wasn't working. He wasn't cleaning a gun or counting money. He was sitting in a high-backed leather armchair, illuminated by a single amber lamp. He was wearing reading glasses, something Jaiwan had never seen, and holding a book. He looked human. Jaiwan took a step back to leave, but the floorboard creaked. Dojun's head snapped up. The glasses slid down his nose slightly. For a second, he looked like a startled deer, not a wolf. Then the wall slammed back up. He took the glasses off quickly, setting them on the side table. I didn't hear you, Dojun said, his voice raspy with sleep deprivation. I didn't mean to intrude, Jaiwan said, hovering in the doorway. I just couldn't sleep. Join the club, Dojun muttered. He rubbed his temples, a gesture of profound weariness. Jaiwan's eyes drifted to the book in Dojun's lap. It wasn't a ledger. It was a thin, worn volume. Rilke. The Book of Hours. Poetry? Jaiwan asked, unable to keep the surprise out of his voice. Dojun looked at the book, his thumb tracing the cover. He looked almost embarrassed. It keeps the noise out. The noise? The memories, Dojun corrected. He looked up at Jaiwan. The things that don't stop screaming when the lights go out. Jaiwan stepped into the room. He shouldn't. Rule 3, be invisible. But the rule felt flimsy now. Rilke is good for that, Jaiwan said softly. He walked over to the shelf, pulling down another book. But sometimes, you need something louder than the screams. Something angry. He held out a copy of Dante's Inferno. Dojun stared at the book, then at Jaiwan. A small, dry chuckle escaped his lips. It was a rusty sound, like an engine turning over after years of disuse. You think I need more hell in my life, Jaiwan? I think you're already in it, Jaiwan said, daring to meet his gaze. Maybe reading about someone escaping it would help. Dojun didn't take the book. Instead, he gestured to the empty chair opposite him. Sit. It wasn't a command this time. It was an invitation. Jihwan sat. They didn't talk about business. They didn't talk about the contract. For the next hour, in the quiet sanctuary of the library, the mob boss and the literature student talked about words. Dojun spoke of poetry with a raw, desperate intelligence, analyzing lines like he was dissecting a threat. He was brilliant. And he was lonely. God, he was so lonely. Read to me, Dojun said suddenly. He had leaned his head back against the chair, closing his eyes. The harsh lines of his face had softened. Jihwan opened the book in his lap. He began to read, his voice soft and steady in the dim light. No feeling is final, Jihwan read. Just keep going. Let everything happen to you. Beauty and terror. He looked up. Dojun was watching him. The intensity in his gaze made the words stick in Jihwan's throat. Beauty and terror, Dojun repeated, barely a whisper. I have enough terror. I forgot what the other one looks like. He wasn't talking about the poem. The air between them thickened. It was that feeling again, the pull. The gravity. Jihwan felt an insane urge to reach out, to smooth the furrow between Dojun's brows, to tell him that beauty wasn't lost, just buried. It's not gone, Jihwan whispered. You just have to let it in. Dojun stood up abruptly. The movement was jarring. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a rigid tension. Go to bed, Jihwan, Dojun said, his back to him. His voice was tight. Before I forget why I hired you. Why did you hire me? Jihwan asked, standing up. Really? Dojun turned his head. He didn't look at Jihwan's face. He looked at Jihwan's mouth, then his throat, then forced his eyes away. Because I needed a shield, Dojun said roughly. Not a weakness. Go. Jihwan left. But as he walked back to his room, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, he knew something had shifted. The monster had cracks. And through the cracks, Jihwan had seen the man hiding inside. And the terrifying part was Dojun was right. Jihwan wasn't just a shield anymore. He was becoming a weakness. And in Dojun's world, weaknesses got people killed. But Jihwan found he didn't care. He wanted to read to him again. He wanted to be the quiet in Dojun's noise. He was falling. And there was no net. Chapter 4. The gala was a display of wealth so grotesque it made Jihwan's stomach turn. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling of the ballroom. Men in tuxedos that cost more than Jihwan's entire education stood in clusters, swirling champagne and discussing territories like they were discussing the weather. Jihwan stood by Dojun's side. He was the partner, the prop. Dojun had bought him a suit, navy blue velvet, tailored to an inch of its life. It fit Jihwan, so well it felt like a caress. Dojun had tied Jihwan's tie himself earlier that evening, his knuckles brushing against Jihwan's throat, leaving a trail of goosebumps that still hadn't faded. Don't leave my side, Dojun murmured, his hand resting on the small of Jihwan's back. The heat of his palm burned through the velvet. I know the rules, Jihwan replied quietly, scanning the room. This isn't a rule, Dojun said, his voice dropping. It's a warning. There are sharks in the water tonight. He wasn't wrong. Jihwan felt eyes on him. Hungry eyes. Calculating eyes. They looked at him, and saw a weakness in Baek Dojun's armor. Then she appeared. Kong Mirror. She wore a dress the color of spilled blood, and her smile was just as sharp. She glided through the crowd, parting the sea of gangsters like a shark fin. Dojun, she purred, stepping into their circle. She ignored Jihwan completely. You look tired. The throne must be heavy these days. Mirror, Dojun nodded, his hand tightening imperceptibly on Jihwan's back. I thought you were in exile. I got bored, she shrugged, sipping her wine. Her eyes finally flicked to Jihwan. They were cold, assessing. And this? The new pet? He's pretty. A bit fragile for you, isn't he? I give him a month before he breaks. He's not a pet, Dojun said. His voice was calm, but Jihwan felt the tension radiating off him. And he's stronger than he looks. Mira laughed. It was a brittle sound. We'll see. You know how this ends, Dojun. Everyone you touch turns to ash. Remember the last one? Dojun stiffened. His hand left Jihwan's back. He looked like he'd been slapped. Excuse us, Dojun said icily. He grabbed Jihwan's arm, harder than necessary, and steered him toward the balcony. Outside, the night air was freezing. Dojun let go of Jihwan and walked to the stone railing, gripping it until his knuckles turned white. He was shaking. Go inside, Dojun said. No, Jihwan said. He stayed put. I said go. Dojun spun around, his eyes wild. Get away from me, Jihwan. Didn't you hear her? I'm a curse. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be near me. I don't believe in curses, Jihwan said, stepping closer. I do, Dojun roared. Everyone. My parents. My brother. My first. Everyone I love dies, Jihwan. And you. He stopped, choking on the words. You are looking at me like you want to save me. And that is the most dangerous thing you can do. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He shoved it at Jihwan. Take it, Dojun said, his voice breaking. It's your passport. A new identity. A bank account with enough money to disappear. The contract is void. Leave. Tonight. Right now. Jihwan looked at the envelope. It was freedom. It was safety. It was everything he had thought he wanted 3 months ago. He looked at Dojun. The powerful mafia boss was gone. In his place was a terrified man, trying to cut off his own limb to save it from infection. He was pushing Jihwan away to save him. Jihwan took the envelope. Dojun closed his eyes, a look of profound defeat on his face. He turned back to the railing, hunching his shoulders against the cold. Jihwan didn't move. Slowly, deliberately, Jihwan tore the envelope in half. The sound of ripping paper was sharp in the silent air. Dojun whipped around, his eyes wide with shock. What are you doing? Jihwan tore it again. And again. He let the pieces of paper flutter down over the railing, disappearing into the dark garden below. I'm not going anywhere, Jihwan said. His voice was steady, anchored by a sudden, fierce clarity. Are you insane? Dojun stepped forward, grabbing Jihwan by the shoulders. I am trying to save your life. I don't want to be saved if it means leaving you alone in the dark, Jihwan said. He reached up and placed his hands over Dojun's hands, which were still gripping his shoulders. You aren't a curse, Baek Dojun. You're just a man who deserves to be loved without fear. Dojun stared at him. His breath came in ragged gasps. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a raw, naked hunger. You don't know what you're saying, Dojun whispered. I do, Jihwan said. He stepped closer, closing the gap between them. I choose to stay. No contract. My choice. Dojun let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. He pulled Jihwan in, wrapping his arms around him so tight it hurt. He buried his face in Jihwan's neck, inhaling deeply, shaking like a leaf. You fool, Dojun murmured into his skin. You beautiful fool. Jihwan held him back, stroking the back of Dojun's head. For the first time, the embrace wasn't for show. It wasn't for the cameras or the other families. It was real. I'm here, Jihwan whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Dojun pulled back just enough to look at him. His eyes were dark, intense, searching Jihwan's face for any sign of hesitation. Finding none, his gaze dropped to Jihwan's lips. The air crackled. The balcony felt like the center of the universe. If I kiss you, Dojun warned, his voice a low rumble, I won't be able to let you go. Ever. Good, Jihwan breathed. Dojun didn't wait. He crashed his lips onto Jihwan's. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of champagne and fear and overwhelming need. It was the kiss of a starving man finally tasting bread. Jihwan melted into him, his hands tangling in Dojun's hair, pulling him closer, deepening the contact. In that moment, under the cold stars, the contract burned to ash. There was no master and servant. No protector and protected. Just two broken pieces, finally snapping together. But in the shadows of the balcony door, a figure in a red dress watched them, her wine glass tilting dangerously in her hand. How sweet, Mira whispered to herself, her eyes narrowing. Enjoy it while it lasts. Chapter 5. The morning light was grey and unforgiving, but the bed was warm. For the first time in 10 years, Baek Dojun slept past dawn. Jihwan lay awake, watching him. In sleep, the Reaper of Seattle looked impossibly young. The furrow between his brows had smoothed out. His arm was thrown heavy and possessive over Jihwan's waist, trapping him against the solid heat of his chest. Jihwan traced a fingertip over the jagged scar on Dojun's shoulder, the one from the knife fight 3 years ago. Dojun shifted, murmuring something unintelligible, and buried his face in the crook of Jihwan's neck. He inhaled deeply, the instinctive seek of a man finding his anchor. Stay, Dojun mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. I'm here, Jihwan whispered, running his fingers through Dojun's messy dark hair. I told you, I'm not going anywhere. Dojun's eyes opened. They were black, sharp, and instantly awake. The transition from sleep to predator was terrifyingly fast. He looked at Jihwan, and for a second, there was panic, as if he expected Jihwan to be a hallucination. Then, recognition flooded back. He tightened his grip, pulling Jihwan flush against him. Skin against skin. The friction sent a jolt of electricity down Jihwan's spine. You stayed, Dojun said, his voice rough. You kissed me, Jihwan reminded him, a small smile playing on his lips. Hard to leave after that. Dojun didn't smile. He reached up, his hand cupping Jihwan's jaw, his thumb brushing over Jihwan's bottom lip. His gaze was intense, hungry, and terrified. I should have sent you away, Dojun whispered. I should have put you on that plane. Too late. Jihwan leaned into the touch. We made a deal. No more contracts. Just us. Dojun closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against Jihwan's. Just us. The moment was perfect. It was fragile, made of glass, and holding back a tidal wave. Then the phone rang. It wasn't the house phone. It was the burner phone on the nightstand. The red one. Dojun froze. The warmth evaporated from the bed instantly. He sat up, the sheets falling away, revealing the tattoo of a dragon winding down his spine. He grabbed the phone. Speak, Dojun said. His voice was ice. Jihwan sat up, pulling the duvet around himself, cold dread settling in his stomach. He watched Dojun's back muscles tense, hard as rock. Where? Dojun asked. A pause. How many? Another pause. Get the car. The armored SUV. 5 minutes. Dojun hung up and threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. He turned to Jihwan. The lover was gone. The boss was back. Get dressed, Dojun ordered, springing out of bed and grabbing his pants. Jeans. Sneakers. Nothing you can't run in. Dojun, what is it? Mira. Dojun spit the name out like poison. She didn't just watch last night. She sold us. She leaked your location to the Viper Syndicate. They know you're the weakness. They know you're here. The Vipers? Jihwan scrambled out of bed, his heart hammering. They're coming. A hit squad. We have to move to the safe house in the Cascades. Now. The drive was a blur of rain and tension. They were in the back of a black, armored SUV. Kong was driving, his knuckles white on the wheel. 2 other cars flanked them. Dojun wouldn't let go of Jihwan's hand. He gripped it so tight Jihwan's fingers were going numb. But Jihwan didn't complain. He looked out the window at the grey blur of the highway. I'm sorry, Dojun said. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw working. Jihwan looked at him. Stop apologizing. I dragged you into this. I was selfish. I wanted to keep you, and now. Dojun's voice cracked. He looked at Jihwan, his eyes wide and haunted. If they touch you. Jihwan, if they hurt you. They won't. Jihwan squeezed his hand. You won't let them. I'm not omnipotent. Dojun shouted, the sudden volume making Jihwan jump. I am just a man with a gun. I can't stop bullets with my mind. I can't. He stopped, breathing hard. I can't lose you. I can't do it again. Dojun, Jihwan said softly. You don't understand. Dojun turned to him, desperation clawing at his face. It's not just about protection. It's... Jihwan, I don't just want you safe. I need you. I wake up, and I check if you're breathing. I look at the door, and wait for you to walk through it. I love you. The car went silent. The only sound was the hum of the tires on wet asphalt, and the drumming of rain. Jihwan stared at him. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. I love you. Dojun looked like he wanted to take it back, like he had just handed Jihwan a live grenade. I shouldn't have said that. It makes it worse. It makes you a target. No, Jihwan unbuckled his seatbelt. What are you doing? Sit down. Dojun barked. Jihwan ignored him. He slid across the leather seat and straddled Dojun's lap, his hands framing Dojun's face. It makes me strong, Jihwan said fiercely. Say it again. Dojun looked up at him, his defenses crumbling. He wrapped his arms around Jihwan's waist, burying his face in Jihwan's chest. I love you, Dojun muffled against the fabric of Jihwan's shirt. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too, Jihwan whispered, kissing the top of his head. And we are going to be fine. We are going to. Screech. The world turned upside down. A massive force slammed into the side of the SUV. Metal screamed against metal. The window next to Jihwan shattered, spraying them with tempered glass. The car spun, gravity vanishing, then slammed into the concrete divider with a bone-jarring crunch. Jihwan was thrown off Dojun's lap, hitting the floorboard hard. Darkness danced at the edge of his vision. Jihwan. Dojun's voice was a roar of panic. Jihwan coughed, tasting blood. I'm okay. The door was ripped open. Not by Kong. By men in masks. Cold rain flooded the cabin. Get the boy, someone shouted. No. Dojun lunged, grabbing Jihwan's ankle. A gunshot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. Dojun cried out, his grip faltering as blood spurred from his shoulder. The same shoulder Jihwan had kissed that morning. "Dojun!" Jihwan screamed, kicking out at the masked man grabbing his arm. "Run!" Dojun gasped, trying to crawl forward, his gun hand trembling. Jihwan run. But there were too many of them. Rough hands dragged Jihwan out of the wreckage and into the wet, grey world. He saw Kong slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious. He saw Dojun dragging himself out of the shattered door, blood pouring down his white shirt, reaching out with a desperate, bloody hand. "Jihwan!" Dojun screamed, a sound of pure, animal agony. A black bag was shoved over Jihwan's head. The last thing he heard before the world went dark was Baek Dojun calling his name, his voice breaking under the weight of his worst nightmare coming true. Chapter 6. Pain had a taste. It tasted like rusty iron and old dust. Jihwan woke up to the stinging slap of cold water. He gasped, his lungs heaving, his body jerking forward only to be stopped by the bite of zip ties digging into his wrists behind the chair. He was in a warehouse. It smelled of gasoline and low tide. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof, deafening and relentless. "Wake up, sleeping beauty." Jihwan blinked the water out of his eyes. Kong Mira stood in front of him. She was still wearing the red dress from the gala, but the hem was muddy. She held a lit cigarette, the smoke curling up like a grey snake. "Where is he?" Jihwan croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. "Dojun." Mira laughed, but her eyes were dead. "Bleeding out on the I-5, if my men did their job right. Or maybe he's already dead. Better for him, honestly." "He's not dead," Jihwan said. He didn't shout. He just stated it. "A fact." Mira stepped closer, blowing smoke in Jihwan's face. "You don't get it, do you? You were the bait. The moment he ran after you, he stopped being the king. He became just another desperate man. And desperate men make mistakes." She grabbed Jihwan's chin, her nails digging into his skin. "I told you. Everyone he loves burns. I'm just lighting the match." Jihwan stared at her. He was terrified. His heart was beating so fast it made his vision blur. But beneath the fear, there was anger. Hot, white anger. "He doesn't burn them," Jihwan whispered, looking straight into her eyes. "He survives them. And he's going to survive you." Myra's face twisted. She raised her hand to strike him. Boom. The heavy metal doors of the warehouse didn't open. They exploded. The concussive force rattled Jihwan's teeth. Smoke billowed into the room, thick and grey. Mira screamed, stumbling back, dropping her cigarette. Gunfire erupted. It wasn't a firefight. It was an execution. Through the haze, a figure emerged. He moved like a wraith, fast and brutal. A guard stepped forward. The figure dropped him with 2 shots to the chest, not even breaking stride. Another guard raised a rifle. The figure was already there, a knife flashing in the dim light. Baek Dojun. He looked like a nightmare. His white shirt was gone, replaced by a dark tactical vest, but Jihwan could see the bandages on his shoulder soaked through with fresh red. His face was a mask of cold, concentrated rage. There was no hesitation in him. No mercy. He was the Reaper. And he had come for his soul. "Kill him." Mira shrieked, scrambling backward over a crate. "Kill the boy." The last remaining guard turned his gun toward Jihwan. Jihwan squeezed his eyes shut. Bang! The shot was deafeningly close. Jihwan flinched, waiting for the pain. It didn't come. He opened his eyes. The guard dropped to his knees, a dark hole in his forehead, before falling face first onto the concrete. Dojun stood 10 feet away, his gun smoking. He wasn't looking at the guard. He was looking at Jihwan. His chest was heaving, his skin pale and slick with sweat and rain. "Dojun," Jihwan breathed. Dojun didn't speak. He scanned the room, eyes locking on Mira, who was cowering in the corner, holding a small pistol with shaking hands. Dojun walked toward her. He didn't run. He stalked. "Stay back," Mira yelled, raising the gun. "I'll shoot. I swear to God, Baek, I'll." Dojun didn't stop. He walked right up to the barrel of her gun. He moved so fast Jihwan missed it. One hand slapping the gun away, the sound of a wrist snapping, a scream cut short as Dojun's hand closed around her throat. He lifted her off the ground. "You touched him," Dojun whispered. It was a terrifying sound, a low growl that vibrated through the room. "I told you, if you touched him, I would burn the world down." "Dojun, don't," Jihwan shouted. Dojun froze. He looked back at Jihwan. "She's not worth it," Jihwan pleaded, struggling against his bonds. "Don't add another ghost to the list for her. Please. Look at me. Just look at me." Dojun's grip on Myra's throat trembled. He looked at the woman who had tormented him for years, then he looked at Jihwan. Tied up, bruised, but alive. He dropped Mira. She collapsed, gasping for air, clutching her throat. "Get out," Dojun said. "Before I change my mind." Mira didn't wait. She scrambled up and ran into the night, broken and defeated. She wasn't a threat anymore. She was just a memory. Dojun holstered his gun and turned to Jihwan. The rage vanished, replaced by a desperate, crushing fear. He rushed over, falling to his knees in front of the chair. "Jihwan," Dojun choked out. His hands were shaking so badly, he could barely hold the knife to cut the zip ties. "God, Jihwan. Are you hurt?" Did they? "I'm okay," Jihwan said, tears finally spilling over as his hands came free. "I'm okay." He reached out and grabbed Dojun's face. Dojun collapsed forward, burying his face in Jihwan's lap. "The great Mafia boss, the killer, the monster," he broke. He sobbed, harsh, racking sounds that tore through his chest. "I thought I lost you," Dojun wept, his hands clutching Jihwan's waist so hard it bruised. "I saw the car, the empty seat. I thought the curse took you." "There is no curse," Jihwan whispered, leaning down to press his forehead against Dojun's bloody shoulder. He didn't care about the blood. He didn't care about the danger. "You came for me. You saved me. That's not a curse, Dojun. That's love." Dojun looked up. His face was streaked with grime and tears. He looked destroyed. "I can't do this anymore," Dojun said, his voice ragged. "I can't be the king if it means you're the target. I can't breathe when you're not there." "Then don't be the king," Jihwan said. He wiped a smudge of blood from Dojun's cheek with his thumb. "Be Dojun. Just be Dojun." Dojun stared at him, his dark eyes searching Jihwan's soul. Slowly he leaned in. He didn't kiss Jihwan with hunger this time. He kissed him with reverence. It was a soft, trembling press of lips, tasting of salt and relief. "Let's go home," Dojun whispered against his mouth. "We can't," Jihwan said softly. "The house isn't safe." Dojun pulled back. A strange, wild light entered his eyes. He stood up, pulling Jihwan with him. He took a lighter from his tactical vest, the one he used for his rare cigars. "I don't need the house," Dojun said. He looked around the warehouse, at the spilled gasoline drums in the corner. "I don't need the empire. I have everything I need right here." He looked at Jihwan. "Let it burn," Dojun said. He flicked the lighter open and tossed it onto the gasoline-soaked floor. Whoosh! Fire roared to life, a wall of orange and yellow separating them from the darkness of the past. The heat was intense, instant. Dojun didn't look at the fire. He scooped Jihwan up into his arms, ignoring his own injury, holding him like he was the most precious thing in the universe. "Hold on," Dojun said. As they walked out into the rain, the warehouse blazing behind them like a funeral pyre for the Baek family legacy, Jihwan buried his face in Dojun's neck. He smelled the smoke, the blood, and the rain. But mostly, he smelled the man who loved him. The monster was dead. The man had survived. Chapter 7. 6 months later. The ocean sounded different here. In Seattle, the water had sounded like a threat, grey waves crashing against steel piers. Here, on the quiet coast of Oregon, it sounded like a heartbeat. Rhythmic. Steady. Seo Jihwan stood on the deck of the small, cedar-shingled house, a ceramic mug of coffee warming his hands. The morning fog was lifting, revealing a pale, watercolor sky. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing an oversized grey sweater, Dojun's sweater, that swallowed his hands. "You're going to catch a cold." The voice came from behind him. Low. Warm. Jihwan didn't jump. He didn't flinch. He just smiled and leaned back as Baek Dojun wrapped his arms around him from behind. Dojun pressed a kiss to the side of Jihwan's neck, lingering there, inhaling the scent of his skin. The Reaper was gone. The man holding him was wearing worn denim jeans and a white t-shirt. The tension that used to hold his shoulders up like wire hangers had dissolved. "The coffee is hot," Jihwan murmured, tilting his head back to rest on Dojun's shoulder. "Come inside," Dojun mumbled against his skin. "I made breakfast." They moved into the kitchen. It was small, cluttered with books and sunlight. A far cry from the glass mausoleum in Seattle. Dojun had kept his word. The night the warehouse burned, the Baek Empire burned with it. It hadn't been easy. Power doesn't like a vacuum. Dojun had spent 3 months liquidating assets, handing over territories to rivals who were too stunned to ask questions, and burying the evidence of his past life deep enough that the FBI stopped digging. He had walked away from a billion-dollar kingdom with nothing but a bag of cash and the man he loved. Jihwan sat at the wooden table. Dojun placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. It was simple food. Imperfect. The toast was a little burnt on the edges. Jihwan loved it. Kong sent a letter, Dojun said, sitting across from him. He didn't look worried. He looked amused. Oh. Jihwan took a sip of coffee. Is he still alive? Barely. He's running a nightclub in Busan now. Says he misses the dental plan, but likes not getting shot at. Dojun reached across the table, his fingers finding Jihwan's. He asked if I regret it. Jihwan paused. He looked at Dojun's hand. The knuckles were still scarred, a map of a violent history that would never fully fade. Do you? Jihwan asked quietly. You were a king, Dojun. Now you're just a guy who burns toast. Dojun laughed. The sound was rich and genuine, vibrating in the small room. He squeezed Jihwan's hand, then stood up and walked around the table. He pulled Jihwan up from the chair, maneuvering him until Jihwan was pressed against the edge of the table, trapped between the wood and Dojun's body. I was never a king, Dojun said, his voice dropping to that low, intimate rumble that still made Jihwan's knees weak. He placed his hands on Jihwan's waist, his thumbs rubbing slow, possessive circles over the wall of the sweater. I was a prisoner. I was a ghost haunting my own life. Dojun leaned in, his nose brushing against Jihwan's. His eyes were clear, reflecting the morning light. I don't miss the crown, Jihwan, Dojun whispered. I don't miss the fear. I wake up every morning, and the first thing I see is you. Not a threat. Not a contract. Just you. He tilted his head, capturing Jihwan's lips in a slow, deep kiss. It tasted of coffee and peace. There was no rush. No desperation. Just the lazy, confident exploration of two people who knew they had all the time in the world. Jihwan sighed into the kiss, his hands coming up to grip Dojun's biceps. He could feel the strength there, the power that had once broken bones, now used only to hold him up. Dojun pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against Jihwan's. You saved me, Dojun breathed. We saved each other, Jihwan corrected softly. Dojun smiled, a small, crooked thing that reached his eyes. I bought something. For the house. More books. Jihwan teased. No. Dojun reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Jihwan's breath hitched. Dojun opened it. Inside were two simple bands. Platinum. No diamonds. No flash. Just unbreakable metal. No contracts, Dojun said, his voice trembling slightly. No terms. No expiration date. Just a promise. If you'll have me. Jihwan looked at the rings, then up at the man who had walked through fire for him. The man who had learned to read poetry to quiet the screams. The man who was finally free. Jihwan took the ring. He took Dojun's hand, the hand of a killer, the hand of a lover, and slid the band onto his finger. I'll have you, Jihwan whispered. Every version of you. The monster, the man, and everything in between. Dojun kissed his hand, then pulled him into a crushing hug. Outside, the ocean continued to beat against the shore, ancient and steady. The rain had stopped. The cage was open. And for the first time in his life, Baek Dojun wasn't afraid of tomorrow. And that is the end of the contract. Thank you for stepping into the darkness with us, and for staying until the light came back. If you enjoyed Jihwan and Dojun's journey, please leave a like and tell me in the comments, what would you sacrifice for the person you love? Don't forget to subscribe to the BL Story Room for more stories that break your heart to make it whole again. Until next time, keep reading.